Good evening, everyone. So this is the third in the series of Social on Social, which FIA has been hosting. The idea has been to kind of create spaces to have really interesting conversation with really interesting individuals who come from very different walks of life. We have had conversations on parenting. We have had conversations on what defines or undefines men and in the larger aspect of masculinity. Today, we are going to take a step forward and actually go much deeper with regards to what is the burden of patriarchy and power which plays out in the role and the lives of men. We have very fascinating three individuals who have joined us from three different locations. We have Vikramjeet, we have Rishabh, and we have Siddhant. I would not go into telling you guys about them because I can't do justice to the kind of work which they have done and what they have really achieved. So instead of that, I would actually first request Vikram, if you can just share a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go on to the other panelists, and then I'll come to the larger context in which we'll move forward.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Vikramjeet Sinha. I'm an arts-based therapist. I got trained in different modalities of therapy, including trauma therapy, hypnotherapy, watercolor therapy. And I worked in the first 16 years of my life in the Juvenile Justice Board of Eastern India and also Western India. Did a lot of work with children in conflict with law and children in conflict with children in need of care and protection. I worked with mostly men. I've also worked with transgendered communities, with theatre for development, use a lot of tools of the arts to essentially work in community spaces, trauma-informed spaces. I do a lot of trauma education. In the last 10 years, I've been working in Kashmir. I was in Pulwama for many years before it became infamous. I was there from 2012 onwards and worked in Sri Lanka, also Cambodia, Punjab. Mostly my area is working with young boys or young girls, and with the youth, but working with primarily my focus on masculinity has been because I worked a lot of my early life has been working with boys, in a sense, boys who runaway boys with, who've done crime, even working in people who are more influenced by taking up radical sort of ways of, militancy or protest. And I've worked with orphans. So a lot of that work has been with young boys and using the arts. So that's my background. And here I am to have a conversation with all of you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vikram. Rishabh? You're on mute, Rishabh.
I started my career taking calls with American customers way back in 2007, fixing their computers. And, those were my first lessons in human interaction, particularly where people couldn't see me, but I had to convince them to kind of follow what I was telling them. And I think many years later, when I joined the nonprofit sector, and I took on the role of fundraising, those skills kind of kept me in good stead. So the last decade, I've been in the nonprofit space, particularly amplifying stories of those who are connected with their communities, are close to the geographies where they are kind of invested in. And I've tried to kind of take their voices mainstream. And in that, I've tried to build connections with people who have resources, people who have access, and I've been the bridge between kind of people who work and people who have the money. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much, Rishabh. Over to you, Siddhant.
Oh, thank you, Ranjan. I think it's blessed to be here amongst this group of other such wonderful panelists. Hi to all. My name is Siddhant. I lead an organization called Mind Piper. From my own personal interest in mental health in the late teens, I'd always thought about working in the mental health field, but my education took me to engineering. And once I got the opportunity to really be able to select the field I want to work on, mental health is where it serendipitously took me. And I've been working in the mental health field for the past 8 years. Our work involves efforts towards ending mental health inequity in India by having a design approach to creating mental health solutions as systems and being able to scale them with the state government support. To really bring in the support at the margins with offering quality support as well. Our work during COVID essentially was focused towards having those voices which are often unheard or the mental health conversation never ever reaches, to be able to be the ones who are actually kept in the first mile in a conversation and our interaction and our interventions. And fortunately, with the support of the, I think this wonderful change makers, the panel here, and many more outside, were able to reach out to the stakeholders who are essentially young men and girls, and to have those get trauma-informed and grief-informed support in those really trying times. And what really drives me here in the conversation here is in terms of just being able to learn from the group here. And yeah, thank you so much, Ranjan, for having me here.
No. Firstly, I think the least amount of fiction which it took to kind of get all three of you together in itself speaks volume with regards to, in some sense, how you guys also want to kind of just come out and talk about certain issues which you feel close to. And as men, the reason why I also reached out to you was because I had done this in the last live session as well, where of the start, I kind of we acknowledged that yes, this is a panel which is again just men talking. But it is slightly different because we are not trying to explain things with regards to how the world should be. Rather, we are just trying to be here to reflect as to what we can do differently to create a better, more equitable space. Vikram, in total now, you have been working on you have been associated from the very beginning on the issue of masculinity in some form or the other by virtue of the work that you have done. And in total, like how many years now?
So I think when I think about how long I've started working, I actually started working in 1999, formally in the juvenile justice home in east of India, in basically a suburb in Calcutta, and and there were all sorts of boys, and the program was on masculinity. So Prajuk, the organization, was working with the boys very consciously, and they had another department which was working with the transgendered youth, so men who did not identify themselves as men. So, but they were also series a part of the masculine variation in a sense. So at one level, I was working with young boys, and in the evenings, I was doing pro bono work, theatre for development with transgendered communities called the Koti communities. So it was kind of a very interesting sort of a space. And I was 23 then, 24 then, I was just sort of got out of Delhi School of Economics. I did my master's in social anthropology, so I had an anthropology background. I mean, I wasn't formally trained in theater. I wasn't a drama therapist, or I wasn't trained in that. So those years were primarily using looking for modules and manuals and looking at exercises and processes, and I learned on the job. So the first 10 years of my life before I got formally trained in art-based therapy in India, because going abroad and doing all of those things was there. You had to be a formal. What would I call myself? I didn't have a sort of a title, and I had sort of left home very early, and I didn't want to do corporate work. I didn't want to do advertisement. I didn't want to do, get into academics. And there was a lot of. I mean, I think these are concepts of idea that you're a man, and then you have to sort of earn a sort of money. A certain kind of a pay package, and you've done, social anthropology, you've come from D school, there's a certain status involved, you're upper middle class Bengali, you have to marry, you have to have children, you have to have so much amount of balance, and then you sort of let go of all of that and say, no, I want to do theater in the juvenile homes in a suburban Calcutta. And my cousin said that, it'd be depressing and all of that. And I thought that, no, I think this is my path, and this is what I would like to do. I want to bring meaning in my life. So I think the impulse to search for meaning, to find purpose. So I had 3,000 rupees for a per salary that, working for 8 hours in the juvenile home. And during that time, I think the most depressing moment when I found out the guard at the juvenile home and I got the same salary, so that was a moment of like, I felt like, oh God, maybe I've shot myself in the foot. And I often feel like that, even working in Kashmir, in 2016 or 17, when in the middle of all the tear gases and I was there trapped, I thought like, oh, I must have shot myself in the foot now, because what have I got myself into, So the idea of vulnerability, at the same time having a discipline in that vulnerability, because your technique and your tool becomes the discipline. Every day rocking up to work, every day to sort of continuously manage all of that becomes the discipline. So anyways, this is what I've been doing since of the years, 26 years.
So Rishabh, I mean, you started with, as you mentioned, that you started with giving technical inputs to people in the US on how to fix their laptop. From that to what you're doing, I mean, and even Siddhant mentioned as to how from doing engineering to actually now working on mental health and well-being. I mean, these are very, to say, non-orthodox manner in which you guys have really chosen what you want to do, which is so different from what otherwise the trajectory would have been. So as a man, particularly, that I would want to understand as to how did you make these choices, and how difficult or easy was it for you guys to choose the manner in which what you chose you wanted to do? Rishabh, maybe we can first go with you and then Siddhant.
So at the age of 17, I was an utter failure in life, right? So I was this guy who had passed out class 12. I had cheated throughout the board exams to make it through. I couldn't clear any engineering exams. I had no clue what alternative fields there were available. So there was no CA for me. There was no BSc, BCom. Like, I just completely lost, right? And I spent a year kind of in wilderness, taking tuitions here and there, but knowing that I wouldn't be able to make it through. And by the time I was 18 and a half, basically I was in the same place that I was a year ago, right? But with the assurance that even if I tried for a year, I would reach nowhere, right? In hindsight, and as you've asked me this question, I'm reflecting on this, right? I think there's always been a pressure on me to kind of be responsible in a certain way, right? So, and this isn't when I turned 18 or 17, this was way before, right? I lost my biological mom when I was 11. And one of the memories that still haunts me is that when she was really sick and when she was in her sort of paternal home, she used to tell me ki when you grow up, take me out from here, right? And that rescuer fantasy has played out in my life for so many years without even me knowing it, right? Or when I was 13 or 14 and my dad was struggling to make ends meet, my grandfather would say, why don't you work a little, and whatever you earn, why don't you give it at home? And so by the time when I was 18, with this responsibility of being the eldest son, with someone who had lost their mother and failed to kind of rescue them, by the time I was 18 and a half, I was under tremendous pressure. I had failed in academics. I was not contributing to the household, not contributing as in like, as if it is my sole duty to contribute, right? So not contributing financially. I'd lowered the prestige of the family because I'd not done anything phenomenal that other people were doing. And all of these expectations. And the first choice that I made was, fine, I'm an utter failure. In any case, I'm not able to do anything. At the very least, I can make some money for myself because I speak decent English, which is why I went to Wipro BPO and picked up the first job that I got, right? I mean, in hindsight, it was the best decision I could have taken. But I mean, the intense amount of pressure that one had to go through while trying to get a bachelor's degree, while working full time, taking a loan, contributing to the family, being emotionally present to their aspirations, and not having a clue on, some of the people who talk to me now, and like, weren't those the best years of your life? Weren't those things like, that shaped you? And I said, I wish I was shaped by playing the veena, or I was shaped by my desire to draw or my desire to learn music, which I have. I mean, as a young person, I didn't have those opportunities or avenues even visible to me. So I mean, I feel for as long as I remember, I've been under the weight of responsibility, and it's endless. I mean, I don't know when that cycle kind of ends and when that script stops playing. So
Yeah.
No,
I think when we start talking about gender, I think it's a fact. I mean, there is no doubt about it that men in general, just by the virtue of the body that they occupy, I mean, they are more privileged. They do have a lot more power just by virtue of being a particular sex. But what goes unsaid or unrecognized in a lot of conversations is a reflection into what does this power, which technically me being born in this body never really asked for, but by virtue of that, what all like pressures or what is the price that I'm paying for that power, which technically I did not ask for, but I was just given by virtue of the societal norms which has been there in patriarchy, which is just like a living, breathing thing all around us. And both Vikram and Rishabh shared like how personally their life took what turns with the turns which it took, and the kind of pressure which they still felt even when they were trying to make choices. In Rishabh's case, it was more to do with something's not working out, and in Vikram's case, something that he wanted to do, yet the kind of pressures which were there. Siddhant, for you, again, like having done engineering and then moving into the space of well-being, how did that happen, and what was similar situations for you where, as a man, you felt, well, things could have been different?
Actually, I'll go a few years back when the choice around what subject to choose in class 11 and 12 was being made. And I think that's where I saw this expectation of if you're born to a family and you're a boy, you'll be doing a certain subject of doing mathematics and physics, and not taking up social sciences is what the norm was in the family for me. So the expectation that do an engineering first, and if you want to go to the social sciences or communications or media, do it after your undergrad was something which was shared with me. And that's also where I think my first experience of mental health concerns really happened for me, in which as someone who was 17, 18, the choice to even pick my own subject that I want to study or pick my own career was something which was made by others and not me having any much voice in it. And spending those years, starting my day at 5 a.m. in the morning, getting ready for school, and ending the day at 7 p.m. with engineering entrances classes. I think the most horrid time which I remembered, I think anyone would live through in terms of 16 hours of just the grind and just not, unless a bit in which you've not even had a voice to choose a subject that you want to. And the conformity towards if you are a boy, you are to pick these kind of streams of actions. You're going to become an engineer, and that too, you're going to become an electronics or a computer engineer, not those other core branches. I think it's the same when I went to finally went to Pune to do my engineering. I think saw the same things also perpetuate there. Of how the faculty looked at men, and the expression around emotions or feelings is something which had to be just shut in. You had to be a strong person. You had to be a strong man. You had to just have everything together. You can't express your emotions out in the public. It's something which you do in your own closed chamber. You can't cry and just hold it all together. It's something which was so rigidly filled into all of us in those 4 years when I was in Pune. And then finally, eventually, to make a choice of coming and working in the mental health field, there are certain schemes of areas of action which have become very gendered. So you would see a lot of females working in the teaching and the education landscape. Similarly, it's true for even mental health. Vikramjeet, in many ways, I would say, is a very small segment of men who are working in mental health as mental health professionals or therapists themselves. Largely, the team I've worked with have been almost all females. So, and the start of my advent of my career in 2015, I was thinking of choice of starting work in the mental health field. I heard things like, you're a man, how would you be able to relate to others' emotions? How would you be able to hold space for others? You will never be able to empathize or hold compassion with them. It's a woman's work. And then just to stay the course and just to know that why you are here and where the purpose and the meaning and the belonging connects for you. I think that's where my journey in many ways has been shaped and what has kept me grounded for all these years.
Fascinating. So one part of the coin is the power which comes with by virtue of being a man. But even in men, it's not standardized, right? I mean, it plays out in such different manners between different groups. So like Vikram, when you mentioned like your work with juvenile homes, and since you have been one of like in the panel, I mean, as a person, a topic that you have been associated with deeply has been masculinity. So like, how do you see this piece kind of working out, particularly in that context, like different group of men, and how does the power dynamics between them, I mean, kind of play out, and what are the repercussions of that in the lives around us that we see?
So what I understand from the question, you want to look at the interplay of power dynamics between men, and you want me to comment on it, right? So I think like let's put it this way. And the reason why I'm talking personally is because that is where people to do this kind of work derive their strength from. The idea that once you personally unfold your mind, or you personally unfold your heart, you have heartfulness, then you will be able to see exactly with clarity the vision that we're in. Otherwise, the sort of, the pathos takes over, or the victim takes over. So I would say that, from the very, I mean, I have a younger brother, and I mean, he went to the armed forces, and he was posted in Kashmir, and later on years, I went to Kashmir too, and we had a very different, we had a very interesting, he was posted there, and I went there with, posted myself there, so we had a very different, we have a very different life. We come from the same source, but right from childhood, in a way, my father, who's also in the armed forces, in a sense, often would do a lot of comparison, between, look at him, look at you, he needs more help, you need more this, and this kind of comparison unconsciously produced a certain kind of a competitiveness, a certain tension, which took me years and years to recognize that. And primarily when you're looking at competitiveness among men, right from the house to the school, it's from the nursery, from the kindergarten to the playing field, to the, and how boys sort of change. My best friend can't sort of doesn't score that many marks, so he's put into another class. So and then you feel like your friend, you've separated from your best friend, or he scores more goals than I do, so I can't be his friends. So the idea that men have to be equals to be friends, they have to have a certain amount of high marks, get the best, especially in public school education. You have to be you have to have more, you either have to get more girlfriends, or you get more marks, or you get, so this idea of competition, and I think this is quite prevalent in now, with all the genders, but particularly with men. I think it's infused in, and I think there is a sort of a sorrow, in a way, which many men cannot express, about leaving their friends behind or separating from their best friend, and they are never able to tell them, that they miss them, that they care for them, and so the greatest secrets of boys and men, they cannot share with each other. Like a girlfriend would know where another girlfriend is. She would know where she's going and whatnot. Many of my best friends or whatever wouldn't know what I'm doing, So like it's this kind of lack of emotional conversation takes place because of competition, and because of power infused right in the core of structure of masculinity, that you have to be the best, you have to be ahead, you have to get the best of marks, you have to get the, to score at every level. And I think what is to learn with a sense of failure, we are not taught as men. We're not taught to live with the sense of failure. We're not taught to live with the sense of what is to pick oneself up from failure, and how to go about it. And that itself is an act of courage, rather than a very phallic, sort of penetrative, forceful kind of a way. Tenderness is, or the heart of tenderness is not taught. And I think it is there. I mean, in the nursery school, when you see little boys with each other, when they talk and they share tiffin, when they share their thoughts, all those things are there. The tenderness is still there. But how is it wrenched out of, with the act of competition? This is how politics and of power and masculinity sort of plays from the schoolyard,
Right.
primarily from the schoolyard to the classrooms, in a sense, So yeah, I mean, I just sum it up in saying we look at two areas in the school. One is the playing field, another is the nursery school of the class teacher. When you're with the class teacher, the kids and the boys are very cozy. They go into the playing field, it changes. They grow older, they get the marks, and the marks start shifting. Isko zyada acha marks mila, isko nahi mila, that kind of thing. And then again, there's a shift and there's a separation. And I think this is a very important point to look at masculinity, like this particular tension between these two areas, between the schoolyard and in the classroom. What happens, especially when they grow older,
Right. And like you mentioned about how it's there when we look at kids really small. I mean, these emotions, these connect, I mean, are very much present. But as they start growing up, from some place, I think the sense of competition kind of really takes over, or it's drilled down. I think Rishabh, you were mentioning something with regards to how at age 17 you felt like a complete failure, and then how from there you picked up the first job that you could get because of a skill that you had identified. From there to now where you have reached, I'm sure there were multiple, you would have seen things shift with regards to the power that you had when you started and the power that you have where you have reached now. And you would have seen that power shift in the conversations with regards to the same individuals, maybe over a period of time, as to how that would have played during those days to maybe now where you are. What has been your take on it? I mean, now that you look back and you reflect, and knowing that how reflective you are as an individual, I mean, how do you connect with that piece of it? And do you see you like how have you changed with that, or has it something been where it's more to do with the fact that like you have the power with which you kind of say something now and it will get work done, but maybe 10 years ago that would not have been the case. So how do you see that shift, and how does it kind of play out for you? I think you're on mute, Rishabh.
Honestly, I think I have never so far been reluctant to acknowledge that I wield any power. Right? So I have not occupied that space for a long time. And that's because, and as Vikramjeet was talking, I had goosebumps for a moment, right? I think I have inherited stories that are not mine. So I've gone through a sustained period of loss in the last 1.5 years, right? And as you know, my process of grieving is to talk about things, right? And my dad, who's been my emotional support, anchor, whatever, he was telling me ki, you've lost whatever you needed to lose. Now you don't talk about it with anyone else. Like it's your private affair, and you should just shut up and like suck it up. Like this has happened, right? But pain swells up if it's not shared.
And it comes
you can drown into sorrow. I mean, it's endless, right? The only way to let things out is to let them out, right? And that sense of failure, loss, rejection are all real in life, right? And so when you see, like, for me, my role model have been the males in my life, right? Like my father, my grandfather, my boss in Wipro, etc. And when you see them powering through failure, you feel like, acha, this is possibly what you have to deal with, and you don't want to fail. What you want to do is do the things that come like easy to you, and you don't want to acknowledge failure. You don't want to acknowledge and you just want to like, yeah. And if you do fail, you pick up the pieces and you silently move on, right? I think my own journey of wielding power has been to say, boss, this failure is also mine. This loss is also mine. This grief is also mine, and it is out there. It is out there, So it's a story I've told Siddhant. Someone called me and someone told me, you've broken up and all of XYZ know about this. I'm like, I'm glad, India के Prime Minister को भी पता है तो अच्छा है, right? I mean, पता है तो पता है. Like, I don't care. I will own my part of this story. And in that, I work to call myself out. I work to, let go of my rage. I work to acknowledge that, something was not okay and all of that, right? But I think that ownership, and letting go of those stories that aren't mine, those beliefs that aren't mine, is the real kind of, if I had to say, if that is, I've fully occupied that, right? And what I have noticed is that when you share your story with whatever emotion you have, it crosses borders and boundaries and walls, and people, of course, there, some people have walls so high that they're only able to see masala in your story, and that's also fine. But I've recognized that people want this space of emergence. People want this space where they can talk about what they're going through. And I think that's the power that I bring in any conversation, I think. And that's what I really value, the ability for other people to share their own experiences, their own struggles, and to feel like they can. Like the space that they share with me is their own. I think that is what I value. And I think that's what I bring to my work. That's what I bring to my relationships. That's what I bring to anything that I do. So I think that's the one shift. And it's still work in progress, like most things. It's not. I'm not claiming that I've arrived or anything, but I'm just saying that that's like probably 20 years of work right here.
I think turning up in your own truth and turning up in authenticity is not easy to do, and maybe by doing it, you also invite the others in your environment to show up in a similar manner. Siddhant, the work which you do requires you to look at a concept or a subject which in itself is literally the opposite of how masculinity kind of engages with the world. Well-being is not something, I mean, two of the panelists have spoken about how like the entire thing of compassion and care and love is kind of taken out of the equation when it comes to men, because they're just not supposed to express that. And when you're working with organizations which are also mostly run by men, managed by men, made by men, the assumption is that these values also would not be that much present in these structures. So how have you kind of managed to work on this subject and in a sector where it's not very common? And have you been able to kind of really, push that envelope further and make those smaller changes with regards to asking them to look at this subject differently?
I think it's a very beautiful interplay between leadership, how leadership is taken, and also how gender roles are. I think but inherently leaders are seen as those figures in an organization who have everything together, who are here to show the path together and be that beacons of light whenever anyone is struggling. And I think if you intermix that with most leaders also being largely men, I think it's a dangerous cocktail which you also already are seeing unfold around us. Some of them are beginning to, and many of them are doing a remarkable job of also being embracing their own vulnerability. It wasn't easy for me either, even working in the mental health field and to be able to unpack these leadership asks which are there for you. And I'm also a person, I'm also a man, I'm also experiencing these emotions. I do not know every answer. I don't have an answer to the question that you ask, and can we figure it together? In this moment, I am feeling this emotion of anger, frustration, being let down, and can I just express it to you? I do not want to do anything, but I just want to express. I think this interplay of the leadership and I think the gender is something which is quite complex in its own being. I think it took me my own time to understand it. I've been able to push the anvil by bringing in some practices in my own organization, and then to be able to share it with others. Much of what Rishabh and Vikramjeet were sharing earlier in terms of by you first acknowledging your own truth, then to be able to share to others, and then to just have that moment in which others feel comfortable to also express and open up. I think that's where most of the shifts that I have seen around me happen, in which just talking more about how these struggles are so real, in which you do feel that you are waging a lonely battle as leaders. You are having a certain set of expectations which are of you, and as males, much of what was earlier being spoken of, how the emotion and feelings should be expressed, and adding to also what the kind of financial value that you must be bringing into your own households. I think there's just too many weights to carry. And that's something which I've also have myself been clouded under many times of which battle to pick at what time. And I think it's just been able to get through by just having a tribe which believes in me. I think just by also finding that why I'm here and why am I doing the work that I'm doing. And then to be also be able to show this to other institution organizations by owning your own truth and be able to show as vulnerable and authentic leaders. What does it do for your own teams, and how it really makes it a living organization? I think that's where the catalysis of a change happen in an institution that we have been able to work with in terms of when we look at a mental and well-being culture. It is not something which is a one-off intervention that you do in an organization. It has to be part of your core entire DNA.
Right.
An organization which celebrates mental well-being has to look at its hiring policy, to its promotion policy, to how the very way it also looks at feedback, sharing or receiving, and all of it being in tune to it. And that's what we've been trying to work towards and share with other organizations.
Fascinating work. We'll actually come down, towards the further point of the conversation at some point to look at institutional structures and certain plays of these concepts there. But I'll come back to Vikram here. And one of the initial workshop, Vikram, that you had done, I still remember this particular activity which you had asked a lot of these young people to do was to take that sheet of paper and write down the different masks which they see, and you had asked them to write the other attributes which the world sees. So the words on this side were only for them, which they identified with, but were not really comfortable projecting out to the world. But then there was a persona which every individual, particularly the men, are putting it out to the external world, that how they want the world to perceive them. Later on, the term mask of masculinity kind of came into play, and I think you spoke about it in different contexts. But you as an individual, when in your own journey, if you can share, what were the masks which you struggled with? How and when did you kind of identify them, and what purpose were they serving for you?
See, that's a very interesting question. So I think the mask itself has a two aspect to it. One is the light side that you show, and one is a shadow side, because literally if I show this is the light and this is the shadow, so the shadow is that what I keep to myself, and there are things I don't want other people to know about, so what you're actually asking, in a sense, what are the masks you struggle is basically you're asking the question what I don't want all of you to know about me. And and that's a very powerful question, because in a way you're asking me to be vulnerable at this particular point. So I think one of the things is that there are many kinds of mask, and there's a whole book on mask and masculinity, and a sportsman actually sort of wrote about it. He's an American author, I forget his name, but I could have used that in one of the schools I sort of worked with, and we were training people, students to talk about the subject in 11th and 12th grade in Delhi, one of the schools. The idea that one of the particular masks which I feel I struggle with is the comic mask, in a sense. Often I think I keep a cheerful exterior, and I feel that I often go into the clown mode, because it's easy, and that's exactly what I did when when I was young, and when I had shifted school. I had lost my parent, one of my parents I lost my mom at a very early age, so we shifted schools, and then the thing is that that's the thing which you covered yourself with, because you didn't want to show anybody that the sadness that you experience. So I think and you'd automatically become the joker of the class, the one who had always could entertain. So I have the entertainer, the clown mask, and I'm not saying the mask is in a sense false or inauthentic. It also has a certain coping mechanism to it. It has a certain way to navigate yourself through the crowd and stuff like that. But it's only in your green room, quote unquote, after the presentation of the self is done, and you come home to your own thought, to your own mind, to your own being, you take that mask off. And the most dangerous thing perhaps is when you start thinking that the mask is actually a part of you, and it starts becoming a part of you. When it starts actually clasping its fingers on your face and you can't take it off. So even when you're in the green room, you still think that you are the clown. And that's where the danger is. It's not about having the mask, in a sense. It's just all right to have that, but do you know that you're wearing a mask? Do you know that this persona is something which you can actually shed off, and there is another mask underneath that? There's a mask, and I think that is where the work lies. the work which we can do on ourselves to evolve as evolving men or evolving women, particularly in a world like there's a stoic mask, there's the athletic mask, there is, there is the alpha mask, So when the comic mask and the alpha mask meet, as soon as you see an alpha person, for example, I'll put on a comic mask and I'll be the entertainer to actually sort of ease my through, leadership, sort of huge, tall sort of competency. In a way, what am I doing? I'm actually not owning up to the fact of feeling of fear, of inadequacy, or other things like that. But if I actually own that up and actually say speakfully and truthfully, like, I'm feeling fear right now, or I'm feeling, and I feel that's why I feel like smiling more and cracking more jokes, because actually that's what I'm feeling. Suddenly the conversation becomes very real, and there is a certain disarming aspect which comes about, because you sort of disarm the opponent in a way, in an honest dialogue. And then it's up to the other person to actually have the dialogue then, So yeah, so I struggle. I often have this particular mask. There's another mask I have briefly, in a sense, is called the knowledgeable mask, the intellectual mask, or the Mr. Know-all mask, And I think when you cannot be macho in your, in your muscles, you become macho in your head. You carry the intellectual muscle there, and you show your prowess through what things you know, So the clever mask, in a way, you become all clever. So there are these two masks I have, in a way, and but I'm also a person with I have my own stutterings, I have my own stumblings and my own feelings of inadequacy, despite all the things I have done, because there is always comparison. I remember the classroom I told you about, the marks that I had and the red marks that I had, and Vikram is a talkative boy, Vikram doesn't do all these things, and all the labels that you carry in your inner child landscape, they often show up when the triggers are there to trigger it out, So yeah, so that's what I mean. I mean, I don't know whether I answered your question or not, but yeah.
Thank you so much. I think thank you for trusting and actually sharing something as personal as this, and being authentic about it. And honestly, I think I completely connected. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out the various different masks which I personally wear, but the one which about comic, I think, is the one which is used by a lot of men in different contexts, when they feel maybe that is the most easiest way to kind of just fit in or kind of navigate their way.
Crack a joke when they're feeling most intense,
Yeah.
Crack a joke when you're feeling really sad or something about it. You make a joke out of everything, and compulsively crack jokes all the time when you're feeling terrible, actually,
To an extent, when in therapy or in very serious conversation, when you're just about to figure something out, unknowingly there is just a smile on my face, and I'm like, well, it is not reflective of what's going on internally. I don't know what this smile is doing for me right now. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. Rishabh, I think, just building on the same question, but taking it in a different direction with regards to relationships. ऐसे भी प्राइम मिनिस्टर को तो पता चलना है तो वो चली जाएगा, but with regards to your experiences of being like a man in a relationship, and at different points your own struggle with certain aspects of a persona which comes out, which later on you felt, I mean, was a mask that you could have done differently or you could approach differently. I mean, any reflections on that or anything that you would like to share?
So I don't know if it's a mask, but I think some of the scripts that kind of play out, right? I think there's certainly a power dynamic in terms of wanting the other person to share the burden of care. Whether they've asked for it, whether they're ready to provide it, etc., and all that. And, while mutuality should exist in all relationships, but the thing is that these expectations are so deep rooted. If a female comes into your life, they have to take care of you, right? And care in what form, right? And are they ready for it? Not ready for it? Do they know what you're expecting? These are things that one doesn't talk about. Then I think particularly for me, this rescuer fantasy has been like long present, right? And the more I try and like, the more I try and subdue it, the more it kind of comes up. The more I want to not be this person, the more it comes up, right? And that's likely because I've not even acknowledged that this is something that's happening to me, right? The third thing, I think, what I've visibly kind of, you know, suppressed or not acknowledged is that my own attitudes have been shaped by my upbringing, right? And I have seen a lot of violence. I have seen a lot of oppression while growing up, right? And I think for a long time, I've kind of been this person who's like, I won't be this, without acknowledging that this nasty side or this angry side is also me, right? I mean, I can't change it.
Yeah.
Like I can't work on it even without recognizing it, right? And you know, be having this calm exterior and having this very like understanding and immediately subduing myself when the other person says, oh, you did this wrong, yeah, without like, just because I'm afraid I'll get angry, just because I'm afraid that I'll show myself in ways that are not polite, right? I think I've done that for way too long, way too long, for me to be even now. I'm too uncomfortable not being. I'm like, like, you know, if I have to say something, it doesn't come. If it's not polite sounding, then screw it. But I'm like, it's like an exterior that I've nurtured for way too long, for me to even recognize it's an exterior. This is not me, right? I mean, I've been asked this question, like, you know, what do you do when you're angry? And I've like always said like, oh, I become quiet, or like, you know, I just let it pass. And the thing is, when you let it pass, it becomes rotten. Like, you know, if it's not flowing in a manner where you acknowledge it, and when you're like what is making you angry? Like, what part of what need is not being fulfilled?
It's getting
Not
triggered.
Yeah. So I mean, so I've worn a lot of these masks in all kinds of relationships, just trying to be the, let's say, the nice guy mask, right? Nice guy mask. Yeah, and people also identify, like, you know, it's also this, right?
I'm like, what's happening? I'm identifying with every mask which you guys are talking about.
No. Also, I want to say that, you know, in Hindi there's this expression, चने के झाड़ पे चढ़ना, ठीक है? And then, you know, there is another expression which is जमीन के 6 feet नीचे जाना, ठीक है? So I think these masks have become so कि if someone praises your चने का झाड़ पे, or you know, if someone criticizes your 6 feet अंदर, ठीक है? तो वो सेल्फ का जो इमेज है ना, इतना फ्लूइड भी नहीं, लाइक फ्रेजाइल रहा है कि you know, you don't know, like, you know, you are relying on other people to define you.
I think that's what the biggest thing is, right? I mean, yeah.
इतना ज़्यादा other people have defined you. Like, you know, I do fundraising, and in my fundraising, you know, I end up helping a lot of people. It's not like I get some, well, I do it because I like it, ठीक है? And I'm not doing it because मुझे कोई award मिलेगा, ठीक है? But because that nice guy picture is so reinforced externally also, that sometimes I hesitate to say, fuck it, मुझे नहीं करना है. I don't want to be the nice guy today. Yeah, and I don't want to help you. Figure out someone else might help you. But, you know, I have to affirm to this image. It's like, it's happened to me way too many times now, and I'm now at the end of my tether, which I am like, you know, if the Prime Minister knows that something sucks in my life, then so be it. Like, I don't want to, like, you know, keep running around with this whole tamasha in my head.
I mean, but it takes courage to even just come out and share these things. And I mean, everyone has a different manner in which
I can tell you it's struggle, because, you know, my shoulder is hurting. It's almost like, oh shit, तो क्या बोल रहा है ये public में जाएगा, but I'm like, जाने दो यार. But yeah,
Sorry, you were saying something. I would first you.
No, this is it. This is it. Like,
इससे पहले कि बहुत ज़्यादा दुखे बस. But again, I think thank you so much. I think both Vikram and Rishabh, I think it takes courage to like share something which is so intimate and trusting the space to do it. Siddhant, we won't. I don't want you to feel left out. The pain in your body. Please come forward and share.
Ranjan, quite
Because
like you, right? It's
I-
also the joy of going towards the last. All the points have been covered before, but I think I'll talk about behavior. I think something which happens to me quite intuitively is in terms of having become a listener to others so often. I think that's a mechanism I choose when I really am looking for connection. I just become organically a listener to someone when the need that I actually have is to express. So just by holding space for others, really able to feel that you truly belong and have that true connection, while the core need internally is to really be able to feel heard, seen, and to be held. I think that's a practice which I do quite often. जो mask है जो internal पता है और external को दिखता है कि हाँ, he's a very great listener, he holds spaces for others, he's compassionate, all of that. Much like लगता है यार नहीं करना है मुझे. I just want to hear before myself. पर वो पूरी expectation churning इतनी हो गया है कि अरे हाँ, we can go to him and speak about whatever we're experiencing. पर मुझे नहीं सुनना है कई बार. थक चुका हूँ सुन के. And just to come in and say कि मैं सबके लिए हूँ, मेरे लिए कौन है? And just admit it कि लगता है ऐसा कि हाँ, it just feels that way on some days. I think that's a practice or a action with much of what has been said before in terms of intellectualization जो मैंने भी करा है, बहुत time तक करा है. Also in terms of a practice of being that carer, nurturer, and feeling validated in your own being when you're serving a purpose for somebody else and deriving your meaning out of it. You are valued, you are going to be having that sense of continuity with a personal relationship when you serve a purpose to them. And when the purpose is served, you just feel that, okay, why would the other person even be with me? I think that's the sense which I've also seen play out with my own being.
I mean, honestly, I had not imagined the panel to go in this format where it would reach a point where every one of you actually chose to really share something which was so personal and intimate. And for me, honestly, this is what the intention was when we began this even idea of creating a space.
So Ranjan, I just wanna say, you know, when Siddhant was speaking, is almost like +1, +1, and +1 into infinity. I think, and I'm sorry I've interrupted you, but for the longest time, I have mixed up receiving with doing. That I am only worthy of love
if I give.
And the amount of toxicity it's caused in my body, in my life, in my relationships, and in the most intimate relationships is crazy. And this is not to say that all of us are instruments, and even in the most intimate relationships are transacting, right? And so without denying the instrumentality of this world and the system in which we exist, it's tiring. It's exhausting. Right? Just wish, I mean, if one could really hang their feet somewhere and just say, fuck it. Like, kuch karna hi nahi hai kisi ke liye. Like, my dad often asks me, he's like, what will you do if you don't work? And I won't work. That's it. Like, if I feel like doing something for someone, I'll do it. And that agency and that access and that control and that, the effort that needs to be put in to do something for someone happen one way or the other. But I'll do it only if I feel like it. If I didn't have the pressures of making money and having this persona and being this all available, all round, all invited, all wanted person, if that need didn't exist, I would just sit and like do nothing. And I know that I know very deeply that I'm loved for who I am, not for what I do. I know that. But that knowledge is not yet synchronized with the awareness that, like that emotional insight that I am loved for who I am. And I know I'm a deeply loved person. But it's very tiring to keep playing this game. It's almost like it's a treadmill that's so hard to escape that sometimes even when you're out of it, you kind of tend to run back into it. So when Siddhant was speaking, I was like, yeah, this is like so. I've sat down and done people's assignments. I've sometimes like gone out and raised money for people just to get their validation and acknowledgement and all. Like, what is this? What is this deep need? So it's crazy. It's just crazy, the way it plays out in all of our lives. Yeah.
I know. I think looking at the time also that we had kept for the conversation, but I know there is no one way to kind of go about it. But like as men who have journeyed in this space of being slightly more courageous with regards to owning up and uh, just accepting who we are for what we are, and negotiating that thing internally for us to be, as you kind of rightly said, that I'm enough, and this is who I am, and I'm okay to put it out there. But how do you kind of really translate that? Because this is really an aberration in the world outside. It's not something which is common, because the moment, for some reason, the manner in which it is looked upon is that if you do that, adjectives like weak, not man enough, and these are very real fear. So, like Vikram, if I ask you, like, what and how do you see? I mean, you have been working in that space for a very long time. You have invested your life technically into kind of transiting that space. But like, what are the really key areas where you feel that there needs to be more concentrated efforts? How can there be better allies that we create in a fight to create a world which is literally equitable in that context?
See, I think one of the things we need to know is that in a continuous atomization, of our society, where we are constantly being alienated. We live in tiny flats or big houses, or we either live in the towers or the holes, or in little trap spaces. We are disconnected from each other as communities, and I think we are constantly internalizing what the media tells us or what social media tells us, but we are not forming communities enough. And I think the reason why I work with theater, and this is where the arts come in a very handy sort of a tool in a sense, because it's for the senses, whether it's psychodrama, whether it's drama therapy, whether it's just performance, community theater, whether getting together for theater for development, or just getting to do a play together, or to paint together, or to do drum circle together, or to any forms of ways of connecting with somebody, or to others in a community fashion, um, without a sense of transaction, just for the sake of it, like to swim together, to do a wall climbing together, this togetherness, Suzamen, the idea of togetherness in a sense is very important to build community spaces. And these are the spaces after working on an experience, through a physicality. So we use this word called PEEP during my outbound training. We call it physical, emotional, environmental, and personal. PEEP. So it's great to peep into other people's lives and let someone peep into your life, using the physicality of your being as an entry point to emotions, to the environment around you, and to turn that into a personal reflection. And therefore, I think one of the methods to work is to build more alternative community spaces. And this is the way we can really work together to dilute this idea of toxic masculinity, and also toxic femininity, to look at the dialogues between men and women, between masculine and feminine, between the various shades of masculinity, between the various shades of femininity, to build a community. It's not just among men or among women, but together, and I think this is very important, to have these kind of personal conversations, which makes it more real. But using the arts, using methods, using facilitators, using people who are genuinely interested in holding space. And yes, I do hear the rescuer shadow. I have one too, but underneath the rescuer shadow lies a raw material of compassion waiting to be transformed. Underneath the oppression lies a raw material of courage which needs to be transformed. You have to turn oppression into courage, compassion, rescue into compassion, and the victim into wisdom. So we have three things: courage, wisdom, and compassion. And if these three things but they come from the raw material of rescue, oppressor, and the victim. So the idea to transform and alchemize is an intentionality that is placed within communities and community arts or community sports or anything which builds communities together. That's how we can sort of, otherwise what happens is there is only an area of concern which keeps on growing, and we keep becoming victims of the politics of despair. We just become desperate, or we're full of despair, and we just sit together and talk of despair. Whereas actually, if we start doing these things, then we move into the area of control, and we turn the politics of despair into the politics of care. And I think that's the journey.
That's really something, a lot to think about and a lot to kind of take in. But yeah, you're right. I think the entire concept of community, as the world, hypothetically, they keep saying that we are getting better connected, but we're actually getting much more disconnected. But the connection is, I think, what the main source is, where only if we are able to kind of really work on that and transform that. Just looking at the last, so Rishabh, one last thing that I would like to ask you is that while you said that you maybe personally, you still do not relate, or you haven't really, you don't look at yourself wielding that power, but also understanding the way the world works and the way power works, is that either people who have power acknowledge it and use it for something good, or we see the world today as it is, who have understood that and done whatever we see around us. So knowing where you are and knowing where you want to go, and given how you personally, in your own personal journey, as to how authentically you just turned up for this conversation and shared how you want to, be just who you are in every conversation that you have. And if it's not something which works for you, just being open about it. That also is a great way in which you're trying to influence that. But apart from that, do you see, how do you want to kind of really see the change going forward in these spaces where you do have certain power, where you can actually try and influence certain changes in a manner, or be a catalyst to make that shift?
I am okay to be misunderstood. That is how I wield whatever I do. It's okay if I'm looked at as crass, or if someone feels like, I'm sharing too much, or if someone feels like, oh, this is the benchmark for authenticity. I'm okay with all kinds of assessments. This is not to say that I don't have reactions, or they're like, I'm unmoved by people's reactions, but I think my center is that I am totally okay being misunderstood. And I think my own center, I think I've recognized that I neither need to overlearn life's lessons or overcorrect to any end of the spectrum, which is what I think when I go and meet people, and when I mix with communities, I don't find myself as part of one grouping or the other. I don't associate myself with being someone's friend and not someone's friend, or being in one belief or the other. I think I'm open to receiving people and seeing where they are, And so while I'm gauging, I'm not in permanent judgment of anyone. So I think these are things that I've kind of cultivated within myself to respond to whatever is available to me. And once again, like, I will say what I need to say. And if life works out, great. It's not always worked out. It's not always been like, I mean, it's some doors will shut because, well, but I'm a great believer of the fact that you don't need everyone to believe in what you're doing. You don't need everyone to be the way that you're thinking, right? If there is a set of people who believe in being this way, you'll automatically kind of attract cohesion. You'll automatically share beliefs and ideas. You'll automatically find the space to make 4 a.m. calls, or just cry your heart out or whatever. Like, things will happen, right? And I think this is what it is. And one of the things I want to kind of reflect on, Vikramjeet touched upon it, but I want to say that, I come from the world of funding and money and all of that, right? And in this world, often scale is something that people talk about, that you must grow, that you must like spread far and wide. But very rarely do we speak about transformation, right? What Vikramjeet kind of defined right now, right? Wisdom, or courage or compassion. These are tools of transformation that are not, they don't come in a day. They don't even come in a few months. I think it's just years and years of churning that kind of undo, turn oppression into courage, and it takes time. So it's not. I'm not hoping that I'll wake up tomorrow and just because of the way I show up, the world shows up differently. Right? The world will always be a flawed place, and you just, I think, one of my friends keeps saying this, and I'm just going to repeat what he says, that anything apart from love is just adaptive behavior. Only when we don't know love is when we do other things, right? And to just show up in a loving way, and just to show up in ways where you say like, listen, I understand what you're going through. I think that is that is what I want to do on a daily basis.
Thanks, Rishabh. Siddhant, any parting words or any parting pearls of wisdom which you would like to share with men like you, like me, around us, as to how can we just turn up better?
I think something which has helped me in my own journey, and just going to share from my own personal experience, has been just comfort in your own true own self. It's bloody hard. It's something which the world around would call you out in many ways and forms and shapes. And to know that it's you and your own version, your own image that you see in a mirror, it is going to stay with you. And if that is something which you can hold up to and you like seeing every morning, you will live a life which is wholesome. The spotlight effect that we often have heard about, in terms of we feel that we're in spotlight, but we really are not. And we are doing our actions based on what people might be thinking that, oh, how this action might be perceived or might be interpreted, and not taking those decisions or choices that we really want to make for oneself. I think that's doing it. I think I've quite lived my life with a word which is flow, and I've taken it unabashedly and in my own true self. And that's what I would like to see more of. I think the sense of community is also very heterogeneous in its own way, while it's also homogeneous. So this need for having, I think, the integration of community, of how we see it in terms of the intrinsic and the extrinsic, and to really be able to come together for who you are, and for you to be able to choose your own tribe. The family is not just the one that you're born into biologically, but you can choose your own family. It nurtures you. I think that's very liberating. And that's something which really helps us to both acknowledge our own true self and to be able to stand our own firm with all these tidings which are in the world that we are living in.
Again, I think as I was saying when we began the conversation, that when we had initially thought about the campaign, the idea was to do something where we start engaging more deeply with men and boys and kind of understanding from them and learning from each other as to how can we be better allies in the larger fight for gender equity, for the lack of a better way to kind of say it. And today, I mean, honestly, I'm in 6 years in the running, but today felt really different. Today really felt like for a very long time, I mean, we were doing some kind of work and we have been engaging with so many different youth, but actually conversing in a public forum with 3 adults, all 3 of them turning authentically, sharing things which are so personally intimate to them, and actually just showcasing that, well, this is a possibility of men turning up in this manner and just being open, just being authentic and vulnerable and saying that, hey, I mean, we also need love, care, and compassion, not taking away from everything else which is wrong in the world, but only if these things are valued slightly more, I think a lot would significantly start transforming. A lot would significantly start changing. Can't thank you guys enough, honestly, for agreeing to do this, coming here and for literally the heartfelt, warm conversation that we had.